Chapter 2. The immense weight of the world. Sometimes the actual weight of the world would seem to fall down upon our pastor Nathan. Sometimes it was like life was trying to suffocate him slowly. He would counsel people, including those addicted to alcohol, people with bad marriages, folks on the cusp of financial disaster, people who hurt the ones they love, and people with a pernicious spiritual malaise of some kind. The pastor would often say that many people suffer in some degree from a sense of spiritual ennui. Such an intimidating myriad of concerns, and such intense pressure to do the right thing all of the time, this would sometimes cause the pastor to stay awake at nights. The problems of others became his own. He wasn't always sure he was doing the right thing or saying the right thing, but he tried to learn from his mistakes. Nathan would pray for God to grant him the ability to always see beauty and truth in all things and to show him the right way on his journey to help others. Beauty is not an image you would see nor a song you would hear, but rather an image you see though you close your eyes and a song you hear though you shut your ears. Beauty is eternity gazing at itself in a mirror. But you are eternity and you are the mirror. Khalil Gibran. It was Saturday and Pastor Nathan was continuing to wonder how he could make his sermons more relevant and modern. He felt he was slowly losing the attention of his congregation but couldn't express why. Nathan sometimes found himself searching YouTube for sermons to instill more faith and moral courage, looking at what his favorite political heroes were saying. He watched several of the greatest speeches from both Democratic and Republican presidents. Nathan also found the famous Robert F. Kennedy speech following the death of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. very inspiring. Hope is the belief that suffering may have a higher purpose, and RFK was stronger in death than he was in life. He found some strength in watching Pastor Bob Flynn from Chicago as he was so smooth and professional in his delivery, and he was gaining a TV audience now along with his 3 popular books. Nathan also watched many Wayne Dyer and Leo Buscaglia videos and found profound hope in the messages they gave. He would also search through TED Talks online where he was able to discover many speakers with intense moral clarity who were not necessarily religious. With much conviction, courage and compassion, the pastor was a shepherd helping to steer a suffering flock in the right moral direction. He was there for the express purpose of keeping them from falling over the edge of the cliff. Sometimes our pastor felt thoroughly unequipped to deal with people suffering in bad marriages, to minister to those who have lost loved ones, and to those who feel lost in general. The worst ones were the stories where people were shocked by family members in the ugliest way possible. There was a memory of Mrs. Barnum 4 years ago in his office who cried uncontrollably, saying her husband Frank did not love her anymore. Those were the powerfully heartbreaking stories the pastor would have listened to and sought out with his client. When counseling people with these kinds of tragedies, he would always emphasize that there is a loving God who has not forgotten about them and that Jesus listens to their prayers. The pastor would tell people about how they might learn from their pain and how God may be speaking through many difficult situations. He was good at using his comforting and consoling voice to get people to gain more perspective about their life challenges and issues. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:3-12. Nathan found it extremely difficult in 2007 when war in the Middle East took the son of Victor Munn. He remembered at least a dozen times in 2006 and 2007 when Munn and his wife, Suzanne, would stay after the church service to ask him to pray for their son who was in charge of detecting and disarming improvised explosive devices before the soldiers would enter dangerous zones of war, destruction and desolation. The pastor never saw a family turn so bitter so rapidly. Halfway through those sessions, the prayers turned into grief sessions. Victor didn't react well when Nathan recommended professional counseling, saying he was not crazy and not a weak snowflake like so many others. During this time, Victor did some damage to the family's home and Suzanne almost left him. After much denial and resistance, Victor agreed to grief and anger management counseling and the home seemed to return to as normal state as it could by 2009. One question which persisted in Nathan's mind was a question from Ms. Munn, who continually asked why God let Sergeant Gary Lehman die. Nathan could not answer, but he kept emphasizing that we cannot know the complex ways of the Lord. Nathan also mentioned words from a celebrated Buddhist teacher, Raman Koyat, who once humbly stated that he didn't know what it was like to die but that it should give us more urgency to live every day to its fullest and embrace those whom we love. All of those quotes didn't seem to matter to Victor. He just wanted his son back. During a time when the pastor was trying to explain death and dying to the grieving couple, Victor threw a chair at the wall in Nathan's office and stormed out, driving home without Suzanne. Nathan had to drive her home. When they arrived at the residence, they remained parked in the driveway for over an hour, as Suzanne was afraid to go in. The pastor walked to the door with Suzanne to escort her in, with a blank-faced Victor unlocking the door for his wife and letting her in. For weeks to follow, Victor would scowl at him at church and not talk to him at all, seemingly jealous of a connection the pastor had with his wife and not with him. Nathan reviewed the many counseling sessions he had with the Manns over the past couple of years. With Victor, it was politics and how the Democrats were ruining the country. He was not always fond of the fact that most of the terrorists on the news were Islamic. Victor was not reasoned into these disturbing thoughts and therefore it was very difficult to reason him out of them. Nathan knew in his heart that it was a kind of rage that was not consolable by reason alone. Faith didn't work too well with Victor, either. Victor was also a very suspicious person who would often say that the news he didn't like on TV was fake news. He was a big fan of Fox News. He liked the news organization's patriotism and love of country. The Fox guys were guys he could relate to. There must be some meaning to this suffering in the real world, thought the middle-aged pastor. There is so much pain out there. He felt a compulsion to understand their lives in a much larger context. It was almost too much pressure for a minister to face. A lot of courage needs to be conjured up and received from somewhere. All these suffering people, with no apparent resolutions to their inner angst, politics and many family conflicts. They all seem to be destined to suffer like lemmings to the sea, to be sacrificed by inevitable tragedy. It was too much to bear sometimes. It seemed like there were too many questions. Where does this power of love come from? The Bible told him it was Jesus and God, but in his darkest moments he was not sure what the answers were. His doubts whispered to his heart that a little more randomness and complexity may be a part of the ultimate answer. Could it simply be an atheist jungle out there? Sometimes he had very dark thoughts. He tried to push those thoughts away. Pastor Nathan's day was very busy, and Thanksgiving was coming up soon. His church was responsible for feeding nearly 400 economically disadvantaged members of the community on that day. He had volunteer coordinators at church, but he was the man who had to ensure that everything was done right and on time. Things would fall apart if he wasn't checking in with his coordinators all of the time. Johnny Cranston would provide the music courtesy of his guitar and the church cafeteria's fine audio system. During Thanksgiving weekend, he would pay special attention to the careful balancing of his family's needs and the needs of his congregation. He would be celebrating Saturday with his brother, William, and his family at a small town called Tynes in southern Wisconsin, about 50 miles south of Winston. What made this family gathering so interesting was that most of William's family were agnostics or atheists. So far there were no protracted arguments at holidays which would put people at odds. Everyone had to be very careful not to offend. William, a very sensitive man, 19 months younger than Nathan, is a lawyer with his own small office on the town's main street. He handles many different kinds of cases and people in town respect him for his great objectivity, compassion and skill. He also has a great talent for telling long stories with a punchline at the end. His religion, or lack of it, doesn't come up as a topic of conversation very often. The respect people have for him is great, and nobody with a religious bent wants to offend him or be inappropriate. William is a marathon runner who has directed many runs for various charities in the area. One of his favorite charities was autism research. William was a good guy who loved and cared about his family. He was hard not to like. It's now 6 months later. The pastor had to prepare for a funeral on Monday. This is a death that was profoundly troubling for Nathan, as he felt she was a close friend and cared about her greatly. A faithful member of the church, Suzanne Munn, had passed away Friday at her home after a bitter battle with pancreatic cancer. Suzanne was a devoted member of the Winston Bird Club and a neighborhood bridge club. Suzanne's family was very complex. Unlike her husband, she identified with being a liberal Democrat. She consumed a lot of PBS, Wisconsin Public Radio, and Charlie Rose, and read the New York Times and Washington Post online on a regular basis. Suzanne had a lot of friends who were members of the community's Unitarian Church in her bridge club and book club. Some people in the Lutheran circles thought that to be very strange. The wife of the county Democratic chairman was president of her bridge club. Suzanne's husband is Victor Munn, who would kid his wife constantly about being in league with the dark side with her friends. Most of Suzanne's family was seated on the left and Victor's family to the right. There was not too much communication between the two sides, but many polite smiles. As was his practice, Nathan recommended that Suzanne's funeral program include the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi on the front. The pastor had recommended it to be included at most funerals. Pastor Nathan liked this prayer especially because it has a lot to say about seeing the positive in most situations. He would stress to the people gathered that we should always try to conjure up positive emotions instead of being victim to negative emotions and patterns, no matter how dear the circumstances. He would most of all emphasize the concept of gratitude in his sermons. Victor and Nathan had gone over the funeral order of service in fine detail. Victor was very particular, saying the word God should appear several times and that he would not be called a husband but rather a loving husband. Victor also stated that he wanted the hymn How Great Thou Art in the service. He also requested that he be given 5 minutes to speak. I will remember Suzanne most of all for her kind heart and giving nature, and for her blueberry pancakes with a touch of cinnamon. She was a great mother to our children, and most certainly a loving and faithful wife. And oh God, she put up with me, that was probably her best quality. Her coffee clutch friends like to use the word tolerance. She sure was tolerant of me, huh? I guess we were kind of like the odd couple, like James Carville and Mary Matalin, total opposites in politics but learning to love each other in the good times and the bad. I don't know what I would have done without her, especially after the death of our son. He perished while fighting for our country, the greatest country in the world, the US of A. But I have to be truthful. It makes me so damn angry why Suzanne had to be taken from us. Taken by that wicked thing called cancer. I hope your family doesn't have to go through this. The last word she spoke before going to meet Jesus was, "It's going to be okay, it's going to be okay." But the good Lord knows best and we have to trust in Him, I guess. What else is there to do? Well, I guess that is all there is to say. She was a good woman and she will be dearly missed. Thank you everyone for coming to pay respects today. The service ended up going well, with the last hymn being How Great Thou Art, played flawlessly by Suzanne's best friend Joni Simonson on the piano. There were many hugs and well wishes at the end of the funeral. The only error Pastor Nathan made was to announce that the burial and graveside ceremony would be after the dinner in the church basement, when in fact it was the other way around. He was reminded quickly of his error by the funeral director as he rushed back to tap him on the shoulder and whisper in his ear. Nathan used a touch of humor, saying, "I don't know how I missed it. It was right there in front of me. And I was the one who printed the program." With Suzanne's death on his mind, the pastor was ambivalent and a bit apprehensive about a meeting with the always colorful, Somewhat controversial and mostly cantankerous Willie Sunder. Sunder enjoyed questioning and challenging the pastor on deep philosophical ideas. Sunder was the town humanist who prided himself on getting the last word, more importantly for him, the last rhetorical question. The man was starting to get under Nathan's skin. He often told the pastor he was at church for the people, not the rigid ideas. He would write many letters to the editor at the Winston Gazette explaining his scientific and non-spiritual views. I was in the neighborhood and realized we were meeting today. I hope you don't mind I'm a little early. Willie continued, Pastor, you look like you could use another cup of Folgers. I think so, Nathan replied. It's been a long week. Willie rolls his eyes, somewhat inappropriately. I'm here to challenge you with all of my silly philosophical questions, Pastor. I would expect nothing less, Pastor Nathan said. What's on your mind? How are Lily and the kids? Great, Willie said. Lily's a little bossy, but I love her with all my heart. Then Willie starts in. I've come here to express some doubts. How can there be a supreme being who hears all of our thoughts? How can there be a supernatural entity who knows all of my dreams, all of my intentions, all of my dark secrets, all the sins I've committed? He said. It still seems impossible. Pastor Nathan adjusts his chair to a more comfortable position. I sincerely believe faith requires an extra level of trust. Trust that there is a caring and guiding force which can gently help us along the way, can aid us when we need extra support, something which adds much meaning in difficult times, he said. How could a supreme being exist when God let my Uncle Charlie die? Willie asked. He started passing out and his friend Cal would find him on the bathroom floor in his trailer home. He went through a very frustrating time in the nursing home before he died. He was totally helpless at the end. It was tough to see. Charlie would order his best friends and relatives out of the room. My father thought it was because he was paranoid, but I don't think he wanted people to see him in that weakened state. Why does God make the end of life painful for some more than others? I just don't get it. Nathan continues, I don't know, but only God knows the way, and we simply have to take that amazing leap of faith and trust in Him sometimes. Jesus, armed only with the redemptive power of love, showed us how to behave when He visited the earth about 2000 years ago. He died for all of our sins because we are all sinners. The bar is set very high. There are no easy answers. Faith is a process and we are commanded to love one another. We are always challenging and re-challenging our faith. We are not alone because Christ's love is with us all the time. All we have to do is let go and turn to Christ's love. He will be there when we most need Him. People don't realize how easy it is to turn to a life of love and peace. Once you have committed to this, your life is changed forever. I guarantee it. Willie looked a little more uneasy. Pastor Nathan continues, for those who believe in Christ, He is a strong influence. For those who doubt, He is much harder to find. We must be looking for God in order to find God. It is that simple. Sunder moved on to his next topic. He attends Saturday morning Bible study with lay minister Tim West. West found God when he recovered from the demons of alcohol and drug abuse. He lost his wife and family and then started burglarizing liquor stores before being caught. He was ordered into treatment at Wild House for 90 days and he claimed it changed his life when he experienced the loving touch of Jesus. Tim revealed to the pastor it was quite a revelation that he was living his life incorrectly for a long time. Sunder greatly admired West's quiet courage and fortitude. West was also a huge success story based on the fact that only about 10% of the addicts admitted to Wild House were able to succeed. Where's God for the 90% of the people who go back and start drinking after being admitted to treatment at Wild House? Willie said, Tim's a success story for sure, but who is looking out for the rest of them? Pastor replied, I don't know. But I do know God works at His own pace and in His own mysterious ways. When you ask for help from the Lord, He will lead you in the right direction. God will test us but will probably let us do most of the work. Willie leans forward. I've been reading Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris lately, and it seems there is a logical reason for religion, but in some sense, it seems outdated. It's like this friendly anachronism. Kind of like Victor Munn. You might call him an unfriendly anachronism. The lines of the pastor's face indicate the start of a half smile which would eventually turn into a sarcastic stare. Willie continued, people need to create their own forms of spirituality that will fit better with realities of the modern times. It is difficult to take the leap of faith because I don't want to assume anything about what I don't understand. What about your autistic son? Do you think God brought him on earth and made a lesson for you? Do you see a reason for your son will being born, who had a mental age of 1 or 2? He could not toilet himself appropriately and needed to be in a group home. Is there a lesson from God from this, or is it merely random? Do you believe it was God's fault that he died at the age of 12 in a senseless traffic accident? I don't mean to be mean or inappropriate, but how does this spirituality help you or hinder you in your understanding of life? Willie continued, using his hands to talk. Look at quantum mechanics. How does that relate to the extinct language of the Bible? We need radical new ways to be spiritual. This is an old book. Science gives us new ways of thinking and looking at the world. It seems to me there need to be changes, radical changes in the way we worship. There is a question whether or not we need religion at all. Hitchens would argue religion poisons everything, that it can promote a subtly pernicious element and a lower form of cognition that is in the end harmful. How do you counsel someone like me? Am I too tough to handle? I believe love and truth are more important than a fictional God. Do we really have to make up stories to be good? Are there other radical ways to conceive of the concept of goodness and morality? I think so. I think all that matters are love and truth, in that order. Well, I guess compassion is important too. Even the great writer George Bernard Shaw stated that faith is close to mental illness. Have you had enough of me yet, religious guy? Pastor Nathan takes a very deep breath, then lets out a sigh, and glances at Willie. Privately he thought of his own intense yearning for a unified grand theory of science and faith, but he wouldn't go there. Not now. Nathan was wondering if it was ever fair to bring up his son, Will. Willie sits back in his chair in a semi-defensive posture, like a lawyer ready for the judge to read the results at trial. The pastor had never kicked anybody out of his office before, but wanted to right now. I think your concerns are valid and you are asking probing questions that challenge the idea of faith, the pastor said. Faith is not something that can be categorized or labeled. It cannot be strictly defined. It cannot be pigeonholed into a precise scientific certainty. Don't you see that science is not the whole answer? Much of what drives faith is the tension between certainty and uncertainty. Taking the leap of faith is a way to dedicate oneself to something bigger than oneself. Even though we are not sure what that is, it is our intuitive, creative side that needs to help us out here. Using a scientific analogy, physicists do not know how big the universe is and struggle with the concept of infinity. Religion says there is a bigger answer that we cannot define and that it is okay to live with the questions. There was suddenly a more serious tone in the air, an atmosphere slightly more vulnerable to pontification by one side or the other. Here are some things you should ponder, Mr. Sunder, the pastor said as Willie gave a complacent nod. Some questions cannot actually be revealed by science and I cannot see why you cannot grasp this. How about the question of whether or not existence can just pop in? How can living cells in our known universe appear into existence and what happened before the Big Bang? Nothing cannot produce something, so therefore there has to be a creator. According to one Christian, Francis Page of Princeton Institute for Advanced Studies, the chance of the universe generating random life is 1 in 10 trillion to the 124th power, a number which is frightening in its vastness. That's way beyond human comprehension. Beyond the single cell, there are greater questions about how helix structured DNA and RNA formed entities far more complex than a simple cell. The pastor picks up the intensity, sensing that he may be scoring at least some minor points with Willie. Without a creator, and if there is merely matter, how can there be any meaning? The pastor continued. I don't want you to answer right away, but just take some time to examine these questions. Do you want to live in a world in which absolutely everything is material and there is no spirit, simply things and molecules? If we are all merely machines, what is the purpose of going on anyway? Have you heard of the child genius William Maley? He believes the universe could not have been created by itself, that it must have been created by something or someone. That someone has to be God. He wants to be an astrophysicist and his goal for his lifetime is to prove the existence of God and to have people understand that science and religion don't have to be mutually exclusive. I heard of a physicist in Nevada, after reading Sam Harris's book, killed himself, saying, "Why care when nothing matters anyway? Not love, not truth. This whole existence is just a joke. Why care about anything? My life means absolutely nothing." You see, Christianity teaches every human life has value, while the secularist does not have the sacred and ultimate foundation to rest secure within. Without a supreme sense of wonder, why go on? Am I making sense here? Willie looks like he is being lectured to. Willie continues. I see where you are coming from. Isn't your jump to assume a creator simply as bad as the atheist leap to life forming from non-life? Is the real difference that some are making an assumption, which humanists will not arrogantly proclaim? There also seems to be compulsion amongst religious folks to want to make others follow their rules. Can't we admit we are all in the dark when it comes to the real deep questions? H. Nathan pauses and continues. Here is the bottom line, Willie. Belief trumps reason and that is the nature of faith. At a certain point you have to simply make that leap of faith, Willie. That is not always an easy or comfortable thing to do. Pastor Nathan shifts in his chair, crosses his legs, and continues. Here are some authors I would like you to read. Ravi Zacharias, Chris Hedges, Larry Taunton, Lee Strobel and Peter Hitchens all have interesting answers to the new atheists in some of their recent books. Hedges wrote a book comparing the new atheists to fundamentalists, just as extreme. Zacharias criticized Sam Harris's The End of Faith in his book The End of Reason. Hitchens, being perplexed by his brother Christopher's angry denial of Christianity, wrote a book called Rage Against God. Perhaps the most interesting was Taunton's book called The Faith of Christopher Hitchens. Hitchens was a staunch atheist who actually preferred the company of Christians. Isn't that interesting? It was likely this antagonist who once claimed that religion poisons everything was trying to covertly convert to Christianity towards the end of his life. Willie said, as far as your origin of life question, please read about the Miller-Urey experiment online. Scientists proved in the lab that conditions that existed to in Earth's primitive atmosphere were sufficient to create amino acids, the building blocks of proteins comprising and required by living organisms. Secondly, I respectfully disagree with much of what you say. I think religion has all of these rules which sometimes cut off curiosity. Hitchens was too smart to be caught in this man-made game of heaven and hell. Religious leaders have ready-made answers for the ignorant, so that those who are not informed can bask in the false light of false answers. That's how I see it. Pastor Nathan responded tersely. A lot of atheists look at religion and see it as inane conformity adding up to nothing, an extinct form of groupthink that leads to irrational and silly conclusions, he said. However, when looking at it from an individualistic point of view, Jesus was radically positive when it came to standing up for morality. What makes Jesus radically interesting is the unique tension caused by Jesus's creative non-conformist stand. He commanded people to love one another. They didn't believe him and so they killed him, when in fact he was all about love and forgiveness and seeing the good in everyone. The crucifixion is the ultimate in irony. How interesting is it to you that someone may have died for your sins, Willie? Willie jumps in. I don't see why someone has to go up on a cross and die a painful death merely to make a point. Some Christians seem to be reveling in pain and hoping for some to experience the fires in the pit of hell. Christ could have expressed his passion in civil discourse and not rocking the boat so much. It could be argued that Christ was delusional and would be classified as mentally ill in this day and age. There are a couple of people in nearly every mental hospital in the United States who believe that they are Jesus Christ. Have you ever read The Three Christs of Ypsilanti? Billy was now quoting Wikipedia from his phone, which truly irritated a lot of people whenever he started to do this. Milton Rokeach brought together three men who each claimed to be Jesus Christ and confronted them with one another's conflicting claims, while encouraging them to interact personally as a support group. Rokeach also attempted to manipulate other aspects of their delusions by inventing messages from imaginary characters. He did not, as he had hoped, provoke any lessening of the patient's delusions, but did document a number of changes in their beliefs. While initially the three patients quarreled over who was holier and reached the point of physical altercation, they eventually each explained away the other two as patients with a mental disability in a hospital, or dead and being operated by machines. Willie puts his phone back in his pocket and sighs, then looks directly at Nathan. This megalomania is not healthy, and if Christianity drives some to mental illness, it is not a smart long-term direction to be going in. Maybe we need to scrap it all and start from the beginning, with a faith based on love and truth. The pastor, with a more concerned and somewhat enigmatic look, said, "Again, my dear friend, it is quite a poignantly personal journey we embark on when we decide to give it all to Jesus. We shed the skin of our old selves and we become new again. We become new men, as the great author C.S. Lewis once remarked. When we are reborn, we are stronger, happier, more radiant and more loving. We are brand new because we are profoundly touched by the love and profound care of Christ." Much of the Bible speaks in analogies. It is not literal, and those who cannot understand it most of the time take it too literally and then turn around and demonize the entire book. It's all about your personal spiritual journey and what floats your boat. If secularism is enough for you, fine, but consider what you may or would be leaving out of your worldview. Why restrict anything for God's sake? Atheists sometimes seem to be lemmings aimlessly marching into the sea. They simply have no foundation, and that is profoundly dangerous for their souls. If you don't have a spiritual foundation based on love, what kind of hate could that let in? It seems to me your soul could be quite vulnerable to dark thoughts and ultimately dark actions. Willie now looks very offended. I understand you want to have me consider the entire picture, but I cannot get out of my mind that religion is hiding its head in the sand because it is afraid, Willie said. Science is not afraid of the questions. Science is the poetry of reality. It thrives on reality. I know religion helps people, but is it reinforcing ignorance instead of truth? I don't buy this whole thing of there being a celestial parent in the sky who knows all of our thoughts. There is no evidence to suggest that this is even close to being true. Christianity is a failed mythology and serves no purpose other than to justify horrible wars, make people think about false importance and superiority, and help warped and unscrupulous people make tons of cash. Actually, do you know what I believe? I think the fucking Unitarians make more sense. Unitarianism and Universalism were vital and strong influences in the early years of our nation's development when we led the way toward a more democratic vision of religious and civic life. They believe in transcendentalism, evolution, humanism, and gay rights and so many other important social movements. That seems loving and inclusive, doesn't it? The pastor rubbed his temples and let out an exhaustive sigh. Willie, sometimes I wonder why you even bother coming to church every Sunday, he said. I'm only going to tell you once. Please respect this office and this sacred church and don't use words like that again. I'm going to kick you out of my office the next time that happens. Thank you. The author you like, Christopher Hitchens, is pretty impressed with himself. He is an ego gone mad. If you don't see that, I feel sorry for you. I'm concerned Hitch is not the best role model to follow. Sam Harris isn't much better. They seem to have some narrow-minded conceptions of the meaning of faith. I've also seen both of those men on YouTube videos being very cruel to folks who are religious. Christ would never endorse such cruelty. Hitchens is smart and likes to show off his intelligence, and he definitely rides his high horse. Christopher is obviously very intelligent and a better debater than most, but he's also a smart ass. That's what I think. Willie is uncomfortable in his chair and shifts back and forth. Hitchens was one of the most brilliant men in the world. You're missing his essence. He was unique. He speaks as well as he writes. He was funny, bright and insightful. He cared immensely about the human race and the future. Too many people who don't get him so willingly put him in this category of hubris and ego excess. I am frankly shocked at what you are saying to me right now and the way you are talking to me. The pastor gets up and storms out of the room flailing his arms. Essence? Bullshit. It was a 47-minute visit with Willie. Usually his sessions were longer, but for some reason Nathan was starting to get tired of his old friend flapping his gums. These topics piqued his curiosity but also tended to disturb him more and more often. The secular part of himself was still alive and questioning, but his religious self didn't want to take on anything new, as he was quite comfortable with his worldview. These ideas he discussed with Willie would never come up in the church socials, coffee clutches, and Christian book club meetings. His conversations with Willie were somewhat of a guilty pleasure. He once had a dream that God struck him dead from a lightning bolt after one of his God/anti-God talks with Willie. He felt guilty about concentrating on atheism for too long because it was the forbidden topic. The church could supply the answers, and why step out into the woods, into a dark and dreary path, to ask the questions all over again? Interacting with Willie sometimes made the pastor endure way out of his comfort zone. The secular part of himself secretly thought more growth was possible outside of that comfort zone. Maybe these discussions with Willie were good for him in some very strange way. Pastor Nathan felt like his life was meaningful, but the politics of the church was starting to drag him down. There was such a pressure to build, build, build. There were committees on top of committees, schedules and important people to meet because they were wealthy and contributors to the church. More than a few people in the community liked to throw their power and money around, like Raymond Gilbert. The arrogant man with perfectly combed hair was more than willing to drop $250,000 and have the new church's community room named after him. There were rumors that Gilbert might have mafia connections, but people didn't talk about that. Gilbert was a very charming man who looked a lot like a movie star, perfectly tan from his many trips to the Florida Keys. He would brag about his real estate, his cars and many boats. In his private thoughts, Nathan felt bad that church was too much about money and not enough about people. He thought about the history of the church over the past hundreds of years and how he had read about the religion's efforts to stifle free inquiry. There was something strangely wrong, perhaps, about poring over an ancient book and pretending all of the words were holy and true after so many years. Sinful thoughts were invading again. Nathan couldn't stop them sometimes. The pastor was starting to have more private thoughts that people would be shocked about if they knew. Sigmund Freud's id was lurking and had to be guarded constantly. He wondered if the universe could be a gigantic pile of nothingness, complete randomness without a creator. He was afraid to imagine the horrible existential nothingness that would exist without a supreme being, without these fables to protect him, without mommy and daddy in the sky. How could it be? How could Nathan hold two such opposite thoughts in one brain? Part of his mind thought faith is salvation, and part of his mind was beginning to believe that science, reason and compassion was the true candle in the darkness. Nathan thought back to his days in college majoring in psychology, in Dr. Alexander's class about Freud. Maybe all we had to conceptualize is something called the superego. As he recalled from one of his textbooks, the superego consists of two systems, the conscience and the ideal self. The conscience can punish the ego through causing emotions of guilt. For example, if the ego gives in to its demands, the superego may make the person feel bad through guilt. The ideal self, or ego ideal, is an imaginary picture of how you ought to be, and represents career aspirations, how to treat other people, and how to behave as a member of society. Behavior which falls short of the ideal self may be punished by the superego through guilt. The superego can also reward us through the ideal self when we behave properly by making us feel proud. Maybe that was all that needed to be said. Maybe we should admit there is nothing else to define or believe in besides what we can perceive. To Nathan, Freud's superego concept sometimes seemed more profoundly attractive, realistic and humble than this grand picture of God with lightning bolts in the sky. He was starting to wonder how much of religion could be pure arrogance and conjecture. How could such a blatantly outdated belief system survive? Shouldn't we know all the information before deciding to believe something? Pastor Nathan was most fascinated, however, with what Margaret Lathrop revealed about miracles, that our existence alone is a huge miracle. The fact that the natural world is such a fascinating and gorgeous puzzle, with everything from tiny atoms and quarks to gigantic pulsars and black holes, was what convinced Lathrop there was so much more beauty in the questions themselves. The Native American author passionately felt the ebullience and magnificent beauty of the universe was the best evidence for miracles. It was the concept of miracles, but not in the way most theologians perceived it. It was miracles minus the many rules of organized religion. Nathan had read many books by secular scientists. There was a private part of his personality he would prefer to keep to himself. Many of these secular ideas seemed to directly contradict the traditions, the rituals, the worship, the devotions, the rites, and ceremonies and the sacred symbolism. As he was perusing a Lutheran website, he found much damnation of people who would dare turn away from Jesus to ask questions. He read a passage in a church information booklet which caused him much consternation. How could people delight in others going to hell? Though such people have not heard the gospel, they are without excuse. Romans 1:19-23 and 2:12. God has not left himself without witness, Acts 14:17, but he has revealed his existence by the works of nature and wants men to seek him, if haply they might feel after him and find him, Acts 17:27. The Bible also reveals that people who knowingly and willfully reject the gospel of Jesus will be more severely punished than those who never heard it, Luke 12:47-48. Because of the horrible doom awaiting all those who do not believe in Jesus, we should seek to reach as many as possible with our own fearless witness and ardently support the missionary endeavors of our church on behalf of those whom we cannot reach with our own voice. Nor must we forget our responsibility toward fellow Christians who are on the verge of erring from the truth, whether by word or deed. Galatians 6:1, James 5:19-20. Pastor Nathan was also quite fascinated with investigating some of the smartest authors and speakers in the world. He noticed online there was an actual list of the top public intellectuals. A lot of them were far to the left. They included some names that some people in his congregation would call liberals, crackpots or snowflakes. Al Gore, Noah Chomsky, Peter Singer, Daniel Dennett, Steven Pinker, Richard Posner, Naomi Klein, Camille Paglia and Sam Harris came up on the list. He felt a little humbled by these scholars but felt profoundly troubled that many were self-described atheists. Dennett and others would call themselves free thinkers, many having trouble with the concept of free will. Pastor thought defining himself as a freethinker could be akin to convicting himself of insanity in the Christian world, and it may be going overboard politically. Nathan was deeply troubled by the cognitive dissonance caused by thinking such thoughts. Faith-based thinking and scientific thinking seemed to be so very different from each other. Here he was in a free country, but he was still experiencing this strong sense of taboo by letting these forbidden ideas seep into his mind. Something did not add up. Not enough about the world made tangible sense. He was 53 years old and still having thoughts like this. He often wondered if religion was invented by God or man. Lately he was starting to be convinced of the latter.